I actually, let me switch windows here because I was going back through some of your reading assignments as we go through. I will just get you started here. And again, I usually start with just a few administrative things. We don't do it every time, but at the beginning of the course, we seem to have a little bit more, a few things that we need to get just covered. I did want to let you know last week's recording, the materials, the presentation materials that I put out there, I got them up there about 2 or 3 hours after class. So they're posted, they're available for you to review at any time. And you can go back, look, stop. Of course, I've turned on transcription again. If you'd like to follow along, sometimes people like to see the words as we're speaking. For some people, English may not be your first language. It's another great way to do it. That also is captured as well. So all that information has been posted. And I really appreciate the discussion that you guys have for the online pieces. That helps. This is part of the class. Remember, it's a very engaging, very interactive class, especially the times that we meet. I do want to say for us here, though, because it's so engaging and so discussionary, and for us to share ideas, and we're going to break to your first breakout relatively quickly here. The first class we had, I had a few things I needed to cover with you. It's highly engaging, and the ability for you to talk to one another, share out your pieces, and then also bring things together and hear what others are thinking as we do a moderated discussion in the class is part of the learning process. It's really, really key to this class. But in order to do that, you've got to be here. So I just want to stress to you again the importance of being here for these next 13 Tuesdays. You know they're on your calendar. You know when they are. Mark your calendar. I really don't care what part of the world you're in to take the class. You can travel and go on holiday, whatever, but give us those 2.5 hours on those Tuesday nights, no matter where you are. But make a commitment to yourself, make a commitment to your classmates, be here for the class, because that's where the interaction is going to happen. That's where the discussion is going to happen. And in turn, that's where the learning is going to happen. So do everything you can to make sure you are here for class. Of course, the attendance policy is posted out there for you, but don't miss a class for us. It really helps out everyone if you're here because you've got great information we want to bring forward. Okay. I do want to say, remember last time I mentioned I had a video, and I remember I did one on machine learning and deep learning and neural networks and artificial intelligence. Remember us talking about that? I went ahead and posted it. And of course, I always put the watch times behind the videos. I didn't realize it was that long, but it is a big topic to discuss. It's an hour and 25 minutes. But the folks that have watched it have loved it. So if you feel like you need some additional information, this is completely extra. It's out there, it's posted. And when I was going through the same place that I had that folder, I had one that a lot of people have said, we love this one. It's a 10-minute video on Kubernetes, what it is, how it works. Everybody hears about Kubernetes. Spencer, is that going to help you, hopefully? I just took a guess, and I thought maybe you guys would like to see that. Of course, this is completely extra. It's in the additional item section. But, I'm a technologist by background, and I have to explain to senior leaders what Kubernetes is. They've heard the name. They're like, what is it? If you're not familiar, it might help you later in your career. 10 minutes, you'll understand it. Like we did graphics and videos, it's super simple. So that is out there for you. Well, again, extra. Do your original work first. If you have some extra time, you're interested, those are out there for you. Let me ask you this, and I'm looking at the video here. I got 4 monitors tonight. Give me a thumbs up. Did you guys get a posting for that? Did it automatically notify you that those 2 had been posted? No. Interesting. Okay, so in B courses, I have a little check mark. I can say alert students that content has changed. So none of you got a notification of that. All right, you may need to do something on your side. You guys used B courses in your undergraduate work at Berkeley, correct? All right, so I get a notification. You can set it up hourly, daily, or weekly. I have one set up daily. So anytime something changes, like I'm going to update the syllabus here soon, so we'll be on version 2 or 3 or whatever version, I'll check that chat box again. And anytime I make a change, add something new, whatever, you'll get notified. So you might need to do that on your end. So just double check your B courses settings. If it's too much, do it weekly, but usually daily is good. Hourly is a little too much. But I have mine set up for daily. So if we change anything, I get an update. So when I change it, I actually see the update. But I didn't know if you guys got it. It doesn't sound like you did. So this is another way for us to kind of communicate. Knowing that some of you don't have that, I'll throw some more stuff in our Slack channel. I think everybody's now on the Slack. And by the way, I encourage discussion there throughout the term. But you should have got a notification. In the future, put it up there. We may do some additional things throughout the term. You might want to know it's out there, and then because you'll know to go look for it. Otherwise, you won't know. But I'll mention things like that. The other thing I want to bring up to the class, and I was just going through the last mile question that you had for this module's assignment. Not everyone responded to the last mile assignment. That's a graded assignment. So I need everybody to respond to that. But there are also questions within there, questions within the video readings. And as you're going through the videos, you know, it's simple, click, watch, go through. I even gave you those browser add-ons. You can even watch the videos in, you know, 1.75 speed, 2x speed, 2.5x speed, but I think that's too fast to actually understand it. So you can go through them pretty quickly, but I need everyone to respond to each of those questions. Okay? Can you guys give me a thumbs up? We'll do that for module 3. And I would even say go back to 2. I would love to see you go back in and check back in. Let's say you go through the modules tomorrow night. Saturday, go back in there, look at those questions and see what your classmates have said and respond back to them. The concept of this course is to have an online discussion. Remember, we don't go to, you know, a lecture hall on campus, meet in a classroom. It's all here. This is the way this program is designed. And it is, you know, it was originated for working professionals all over the globe. You know, they don't come to Berkeley for the campus for class. You guys have a huge benefit here. We've given you a lot of leeway. We're trusting you to engage online. And I know, you know, your generation is an online cohort. So take advantage of it, get in there, make it more sociable, get to know one another better, understand thoughts, concepts, and processes, and give your input on here. I want to see every single one of you respond to those questions, okay? We're only getting a handful, and that's just not the way the course was designed. And I want you to get the very most value out of learning this, because what we do in this class will set the foundation for the entire program that you have here to become a data scientist, okay? So, the videos for the extra videos of that, they're in the additional items section. So there's a module at the bottom called additional items where you can see these 2 additional extra videos that I posted for you. So they're at the bottom. All right. Okay, so that's a couple things. Any questions administratively? Something's not working, you're not getting anything, it's all good? Give me some thumbs up. Okay, good. Go ahead, Emily.
So I think I saw a notification for a message you sent out about, let me see, on course participation assignment. It says that we have to confirm our participation. I'm not sure if that's something that you sent out or if
I didn't send it. I got it too. It's an automated thing, comes from Berkeley. You have to click on it, but when I clicked on it, it said the assignment had been canceled. Did you guys get that? Yeah. So Mike Riviera, I'm sorry?
I have a bit of insight on that.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, essentially, it was an assignment that B courses generated automatically, but something was wrong with that generation. So some classes got too many assignments generated and some didn't get any at all. So they just had to cancel all of them. So from what I understand, look out for it later when they won't have as many problems.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Yeah, there's 7 sections. Mike Riviera kind of runs some of the pieces for all 7 that we have to do. I'd never seen that before, and I teach at UCLA, and we don't have that same requirement. But did you guys have that in undergrad? I didn't either. Yeah, I assume, I don't know. Something else, maybe you know, it's for federal funding that students are in class, and we probably apply for federal funding. But just validate that you're taking the class, okay? Whenever it comes. But yeah, I clicked on that. It was weird. I'm like, I didn't make that assignment, but that was automated. So if you know, somebody remind us next week and we'll know, okay? Cool. All right. Okay. So let me, it's a couple things we got to get at. So we're going to do a breakout. Of course, this whole week's topic was where science meets organizations. Again, I'm going to put you in Zoom breakout rooms. These are your student generated questions, the things that you read through the materials, whether it's the required or the supplemental, the videos that you watched. And I want you as a team to come together. And again, it's going to be random assignment. I'm recording tonight's session as always, and we'll post it soon after. But the breakouts won't be recorded. So pick your top couple of questions, bring it back. We're going to have a discussion afterwards, just like we did last time. So I'm going to send you off to your breakout sessions. And what I want you to do as a group, just determine what those questions are when you go through, all right? And we'll go for it, go through it for that way. Okay, want to make sure.
So actually that happened to our room. I think if you update Zoom, it happens. So like I was able to hear you, but I don't think my like classmates were.
Good to know. Everybody,
we all thought it was
please
crazy.
get the latest Zoom. They update it like every 2 weeks, it seems like. But yeah, I always do the check updates. Don't do it now, but yeah, definitely update your Zoom. Okay. Why don't we go to group room 3? We'll do backwards this time. The folks in room 3. What'd you guys come up with? Or we could start anywhere. But might as well start with room 3. What were the questions that came out of the discussion?
We talked about one of the readings where talks about rephrasing the question and saying like, oh, is the question we're asking like the right one? And Emily came up with this really good point and saying like, do we know how do we know we're asking the right question? And I guess we kind of talked about how in business, you never know whether or not it's the right question or not. It's just whether or not it's effective or better for your certain situation.
All right, well, that's a key question for a data scientist to worry about. What do you think, what makes a good question? How do you determine if you've got the right question or not? Did that come up?
Not in terms of a data science point of view, more in terms of like a company, like what are our goals point of view.
All right. Any other group come up with that same question out of the reading and the videos? Okay, well, then let's just open it up to the whole group. When you get an executive that comes to you and asks for something, which you're going to do, they are going to come to you and they're going to tell me why the sky is blue. I mean, some of their questions are so off the wall. We'd love to have perfect data in a perfect world. It never happens. But as data scientists, we can give the best informed information in a understandable, reasonable way. And sometimes their questions can be off the wall. I mean, some of you have business experience. How do you respond when someone who's not a data scientist, doesn't understand how the data is structured, gives you a question that is just so off into left field, you've got to say, okay, wait a minute. Has anybody had that happen? Even from a professor? Surely a professor's asked you to go do some research and you're like, wait a minute. Spencer, you're nodding your head. Arsh, you smile. Who's got something there to provide for the group? Do we have you on mute? There we go.
I'm sorry. Am I still muted?
No, you're good now. Go ahead.
Okay. I've been on the opposite end of that, where I've asked the question and sort of like I've had sort of the glances at me like, what the hell are you talking about?
So you're the problem person that we have to worry about.
Yes. That's why I'm here. I'm trying to fix that. I'm trying to get the technical know-how myself. But anyways, I appreciate it because, you know, I've been in environments where I'm with friends and that are people that are peers and not necessarily people that are my higher ups or whatnot. So honestly, just explaining something to me, breaking it down piece by piece has been the best way. It's helped me learn along the way. It helped me learn enough to where I decided, okay, maybe data science is something I want to do. And I mean, here I am. So yeah, I think honestly, just taking the time, if you have it, of course, just breaking it down to someone can do a world of difference.
Okay, good response. And breaking down any problem, and you'll learn more of that as we go through, is always key to understand that. But maybe getting them to break it down for you, like about their own question that they're asking for you. Anybody else?
Maybe like telling them how much of the question you can answer with the data you have on hand right now, so to speak. They're saying that they say like, why is the sky blue? That you can say, well, and I don't even know what data you'd have for that, but why are customers behaving in this way? That, you know, maybe not have data of how a customer is drinking a Coke, but you can say that like with the data we have, we can say that probably because they're thirsty, you know, like just with the stuff available at that point in time.
Yeah. Is it okay if someone asks you a question to ask them a question back?
That's actually something that I kind of tend to do, honestly. I kind of so I generally, if I hear something that I don't understand, I'm like, I kind of say to them like what I understand so far. I'm like, do you mean that? Like I just kind of like clarify what I've already said. And if they don't think it's right, then I know that I misunderstood their question. Then they'll likely rephrase their question in a better way for me to answer that. So I tend to ask them a lot more questions, honestly, than they ask me questions if I don't particularly understand the question in the first place.
Do you ask them a question from what they've told you, or do you restate what you think they want?
I guess I generally restate what I think they want in terms that are familiar to me, so that they would be able to understand, oh, like they understand this much, and hopefully, you know, they actually rephrase the question to match some of those terms, so that, you know, even I can like kind of frame their question from my own, you know, way of understanding it. Yeah.
That is a tremendous benefit you'll have working with senior people. And I think if you do it in the right way, they'll appreciate it. If it's not done the right way, they might sometimes take offense. And if anybody's had this, please chime in. But a lot of times you can say something to the effect of, so thank you for your question, helping them out. Let me repeat back what I think I heard you say. And if I've got it right, then that means if you agree, you know, this is what I think I heard, is that correct? Then that means I got it right. So let me just say, I think what you're asking me to do is da, 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 and you repeat it. And sometimes you'll repeat it in a very different way because you kind of know where they're going. And so you can say, so what you're really looking for is customer information in this particular market for these years for this product. Is that right? And you kind of, I know it sounds a little weird, but remember, you're going to be a little bit younger in your career, probably with working more with more older people. Play a little more humble, play it a little more like, is this okay? I'm not saying try to lower yourself on it, but you can at least present that presentation to them. They will respect that you have brought forward gee, I think I understand. Let me just make sure. How wonderful. This person is making sure that what I want is exactly what I want. That's good customer service. I like that. So if you go about it in a good way, it doesn't come across offensive at all. But it gives you the opportunity to mirror, it's called mirroring, to rephrase back what they want, or at least what they think they want or what you heard they want. And I'd say at least 50% of the time, no, that's not what I want. Oh, thank goodness I asked you. Oh, good, because I want to get exactly what you want. Help me understand this a little better. And that's where I start going through a lot of detail. So what about it? Like which market and things of that nature. So anybody had that experience? Has anybody done that before?
Absolutely. Yeah, like so I do like astrobiology research, and I work with both astronomers and biologists. And I find that oftentimes like the astronomers don't really understand the biology all too well, and like why, but like they're brilliant at that. And the biologists don't understand the astronomy that well. I sort of have to like bridge between them, and sometimes they ask like really wacky questions that don't really make sense to me, having like some domain knowledge in both fields. And I find that like doing just that and like rephrasing their question and like trying to, of course, showing a lot of respect, not necessarily being obsequious, but like respectfully trying to rephrase their question and move in like a certain direction. Then I understand like, oh, they didn't like just actually have like this crazy wacky idea. They just like, there was like some slight misconception in their understanding of like black holes, for example. And then we can reach some more amenable discussion moving forward.
Absolutely. And these are not dumb people. They're very smart. They're astronomers and biologists. And they probably say, oh, the data scientist guy, like, oh my gosh, he doesn't understand what we do. Yeah, that's normal. We're all experts in what we do. You're all really brilliant. But in a respectful way, you can rephrase the question. And you'll see really good politicians do this a lot with reporters, or if they do these town hall meetings and you get some citizen that asks a question like, I want to know, and it's kind of like a silly question. John McCain was an expert at this on his presidential campaign. He will take the question. So thank you for your question. So what you're asking me is, and he would basically rephrase it into what I would call like a normal question, like a reasonable question, same subject, same area, but he would basically fix their question for them before they answered it. And he did so in such an excellent way. They didn't like, yeah, that's what yeah, he gets me. As a data scientist, you're going to get asked to do lots of different research things. Some of them, you know, because you understand how the data is structured, how it works. Some of them are going to be so far out, you're going to be like, all right, what? Hang on. But you still want to answer them. You want to provide them insight. Anybody else? Let me go to someone else. Has this been a tip or something you've used before? Anybody?
It's also what they tell like GSIs to do at Berkeley. Exactly that. They say, thank them for the question, say that's a really good question, and then either ask a follow-up question to see if they can answer their own question without you doing any work. Or if like it's kind of a nebulous question, actually try and, you know, figure out what they're asking. In like the same way that you've said. So it applies in many different domains. Like it's not just you're in a boardroom with an executive who doesn't know exactly what they're talking about, asking a question.
Yeah, well, you guys are going to be the leaders of the future. I have no doubt about it. So you'll be at that senior level directing and helping and things. One of the things I would say, you can always thank them for the question. You know, that's a good question. But if it's not a good question, don't say that. Don't bring yourself down. Like you thank them. You don't want to say that's a dumb question, but if it wasn't a good question, don't give them the compliment. You know, just say, thank you. I'm so glad we're engaging on this subject. It's really important. And all, you know, here's the reason why. You're going to be in a room of people. They're also going to hear the dumb question, you know, the one that's not really phrased well. We don't really have dumb questions, but like that didn't make sense. They're going to hear it too. And if they hear you supportive of that question, they'll be like, oh, did she get it? You know, that was dumb. Like, but when they hear you rephrase it into a more like, they're like, oh, very smooth, very nice. And you're going to gain your own credibility. You're going to gain the ability to have people come to you and trust the information you do. Because remember, you're giving insights and information off of data to usually senior leaders, but you know, it could be just to your team or to yourself. You want to have that confidence in the information you have, and just having a good brand quality inside an organization does wonders for what you do. And your data really doesn't be as questioned because they know you know what you're doing. So that's the way to think about it. Anyone else?
I think personally, it's just kind of a habit I got into at work. Like when the boss assigns us a task to like the interns, I usually rephrase like the question that he's trying to have us answer or like solve. And then typically what I noticed too is that the other interns also say like, oh, thank you for asking, because I also wasn't sure. So I noticed that it's like pretty helpful to do.
Well, with your training, you'll recognize that easier. Everybody knows, like, I don't understand what they asked. That question, like the information they're needing is, where are we going to find that? But you're now going to be trained, and you already are from a lot of your undergraduate work, to listen to things differently in that way. And so you should take a lead role in those places. And a lot of people are a little shy to stand up and go, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. It feels like, you know, like you've belittled, like I'm dumb, I don't know. I kind of play the dumb card myself. I'm like, gee, I'm not quite sure, you know, can I understand that a little bit better, you know? And I get them to repeat it. I'm okay playing the dumb card. That's a personal decision you make though. But you guys are going to understand how data concepts work so much better than members on your team. Be bold there, take a leadership role, ask for clarification, and see if you can go a little bit deeper. On the same side, I want to kind of drive into this. Have you ever had a situation where someone says, I need to have this data. Can you get this for me? Anybody had that before? Yeah. Have you ever asked why they want the data? Or do you just go do it? Anybody?
I think that
Oh,
really
yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think that really depends on the team dynamic. So I've worked in situations where the situation was sort of toxic enough that asking too many questions was not encouraged. And then I worked in teams where not contributing sort of your insight on like why this data is necessary could be perceived as, you know, you not doing your job. Like, well, I mean, if it was a dumb thing to go for, then why didn't you mention anything? If you already knew that this was a waste of time, you should have obviously told me. So I think it depends a lot on the team dynamic, and you should probably try and stay away from the teams where asking like why, what are we doing here, and why do you need this piece of data is probably not a good idea. It won't be overall a good experience. But one thing that sort of, and on the previous question as well, I wasn't sure if this is something to mention because it seems kind of silly. But one thing that helps with all of these situations is sort of to establish a rhythm of communication. Unfortunately, to put yourself on the side of the expertise. It's like, hey, I'll be the data person. I'll be like in charge of this thing. I'll handle this for you. But I will have weird, dumb questions from your businessy point of view, or from your technical point of view, or from your bio or astro point of view. Like, I'll come with my expertise, but I won't know what you necessarily want. I'll ask some weird questions. I'm going to tell you some things that seem sort of like they're working out, that they're not going to work out ahead of time. So like, I'll take this mantle of the expert on the data, and please understand that this is not me sort of saying something to offend you, to undermine your authority. I'm just sort of contributing the expertise from data side, and establishing that relationship early on is super helpful. Later on, when you have to tell them, when you have to literally explain to someone that a p-value does not say what they want it to say. They want this to be like the sure thing, but you can't give them a sure thing just because statistics, reality doesn't work this way. Having established that communication rhythm ahead of time is like extremely helpful. Doing this pre-work ahead of time, so you don't have to do it in the moment when the time comes, is kind of my go-to for these situations.
Yeah, and it goes back to building your brand value within an organization. That, you know, part of this program is not just to make you an amazing data scientist, but also to make you a great leader as a data scientist. But hopefully you're not in organizations where the toxicity is so great that you have to say the words like, oh, I hope I don't offend you. But we will be in those. Any of you plan to go into management consulting after? You can all go today. So I can tell you from my management consulting world, and we answer questions, hard questions for clients. It can be very tricky. You know, this is a client relationship, not a team member relationship. And you, like Anton's saying, you have to really be delicate in the way you bring those things forward. Maybe a little trick. I'll try to give you some things as we go through. Especially if you're more junior person, it's a really senior person, they're saying, go do this. If you don't feel comfortable right then and there in the meeting or the request or whatever, however the content comes from you, it usually comes in the morning, or usually it's on a Monday morning after they've thought all weekend. You can then go back to them at the end of that same day. It's kind of key to do this in the very same day. Or if it's before lunch, go after lunch. If it's like 1 p.m. they ask you, go back to them before 5 p.m. But come back and say, hey, you know, I thought about your question. So glad you brought this to me. I'm looking forward, anxious to work on it. I've already got some ideas, you know, churning, you know, let them know you're engaged with it. Here's a short outline. It could be just 2 or 3 bullets. It could be the main question with 1 or 2, 3 bullets on it. This is the area that I'm going to lay out based on the question you asked me. I just wanted to share this with you. Does this look like, wait, this is like, look, I'm heading in the right direction. And it basically gives you another chance. And sometimes it's outside a team, or, you know, they might bring you all into a conference room. There's a lot of people and it's not quite the right place to do it. But if it's one-on-one or one on a few, bring it back up and say, this is what I think I heard this morning when you asked about it. This is what I'm thinking of. Are we aligned here? Does this seem right to you? Am I heading in the right direction for what you're looking for? Just gives you yet another opportunity to bring it back up again. Does that help out? That makes sense? Plus, it kind of gives you a chance to sit back and think. You can go back to your desk, back to your, you know, online or wherever you are, and just, let me really noodle on this and maybe even think like, how am I going to approach this with this person? So the reason I ask about the question of why you want to know, this person might say, go out and get me this information. Here's the CEO, she's dying to go into this new market, and she thinks she needs this data to effectively answer some question. That's her thought. Now, she's a smart person. She knows that product, but she may not know that market. So it's just as new to you as it is to her. But she thinks this is the information she needs to ask the question. If you have a relationship good enough with her and she doesn't mind answering a few more questions, the goal is to try to find like, why do you need that information? So let's say she's looking for demographic information on a market. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, we can research that. We can dive into it. We can figure it out. Why do you need demographic information? She might come back, oh, well, our research shows this is the target market. This is, the demographic we need. So we're trying to find where those people are. Ah, I see. Okay. And you've done enough research in that market to know the product in all the other markets works the same in this one. Well, no. We're just, it works in all of the others. It's got to work in this one too. So what she's really asking you for is, I need to find the ideal market for this product in this particular country or region or whatever she's looking for. That may be a different set of data, because her end goal is to find out where should I be targeting things, not necessarily finding a specific demographic that in all the other markets is always our demographic. Does that make sense? If you can dive a little deeper in, and this becomes to help you build your relationship, you'll probably provide her deeper insight. We did this research. It's amazing in this target market, let's say it's India, where people don't buy iPhones, they tend to buy more Samsungs, and research shows that, because it's extremely price sensitive. All the other markets you've sold in have been Japan and Eastern Europe and North America, which are very well-developed markets. India's a growth market. Have you considered looking at and you're bringing her insight that she didn't even consider before, but you understand from the data how the market is bifurcated between, say, the Android and the iOS systems. You may not even be thinking those. It's just a way of how you bring those forward. Okay. Let's go to group 2. Team 2, room 2. What'd you guys come up with for your question?
I don't know what room I was in.
And let me see. No, I've already erased it off my screen. I apologize. I didn't have the names here.
Okay, well, maybe my group can go. I'm good to talk.
Sure, go ahead.
So we came across a couple questions, but one that we really wanted to discuss, like as a whole, was how to distinguish a type 2 question from a type 3 question. Because sometimes they really seem like they're the same.
Okay, let's start with this. For anybody in the group here, what is a type 1 problem, a type 2 problem, and a type 3 problem? You had that in your assignment. Anybody? So explain that difference to us for the class.
It sounded like a type 1 problem is like embedded within the text of the question, or sorry, a type 1 question is like embedded within the text of the question itself. So it follows naturally. Whereas a type 2, and this is where the distinction becomes more subtle. A type 2, you have to make inferences about that low order question. Whereas a type 3, there's something mystical that makes it a higher order problem. Do I have that understanding correctly?
No, that's a good way to think about it. Anybody else want to chime in? And we'll focus in a little bit more on 3. What makes 3, these problems, these level 3 problems so different than 1? I mean, 1, okay, here's the information. There's the data. I can see it. 2, this is this, this is this. Okay, then that would be that. That makes sense. What's 3? Go a little bit deeper there for me.
I guess like one of the things that we had also talked about was like for type 1s, like the question and the answer are like super clear. So like, I think they didn't really talk about like clarity of question and what that exactly means. But I think in my interpretation, it's that like when you hear the question, you already know what process you have to go through in order to get to the answer, I think, right? And so I think what makes type 3 like super different from the rest of them is that you hear the question, you go, what exactly am I supposed, like, how do I even, what like smaller chunks do I have to break this question into in order to even get to some meaningful answer? So
Yeah, no,
yeah.
good way to put it. Anybody else? Yeah, so the reason these distinctions on these different, type 1, 2, and 3 problems is, if it's super clear on the base information, you're going to use type 1 in everything, do students at Berkeley eat a lot of pizza? All right, let's take the data. Do we have students? Yes, we do. Do they, can we look at the records from the mess halls, from the catering, from the cafeterias, from the local restaurants? Yeah, we can see lots of pizza sales in these regions. Okay, that makes sense. Do Berkeley students like pizza? Well, I would infer they do, because there's buying a lot of them. I mean, why would you buy something you don't like? I mean, it didn't say that in the data, but you can kind of infer that. All right. Well, do Berkeley students want to go open pizza restaurants when they graduate? I don't know. Like, they do eat a lot of pizza, but does that mean they want to open a pizza restaurant? No, they might want to go off and be data scientists when they graduate. Or, well, I don't know, they might be business leaders. It might be in the restaurant, but yeah, they could. Like, there's a lot of things you can say, like, well, there's some probability that can happen. These levels of the information that you have. And when you start doing your research, you're always going to have the base one, but it's a combination of those things that can answer problems for you, can answer questions. The value you bring as a data scientist is understanding these nuances and dynamics of these different levels of what you know and what you don't know. And can the data be inferred into certain things? Facebook, by the way, is brilliant at this. They can take information and know who you are, where you go, what websites you go to, who are your friends, what websites your friends go to, who they connect with, what you like, what you don't like, based on all your likes and posts, what you repost and don't repost. They can say, oh, this person votes for this political party. They tend to like this food. They tend to be athletic. I mean, they can infer all these different things from a whole bunch of value and data sets that come about from that. And you guys know about the social graph that even means that even further. This is how deep they can understand who you are and what you are, even though you don't tell them about that. That's what data scientists can do. They can bring different data sets together and take all these different level of problems, with the most basic being that level 1 problem, and saying, yeah, how many pizzas are sold on campus at Berkeley? Here's the data. There's the answer. Done. Does that mean Berkeley students like it? Does that mean they eat a lot of, like, there's so many other things that can come from that. Does that help out? Salinas, you asked that question. Does that, for everybody who was in that group? All right. Any other items that came out of that, or was that your only one? Okay, the last room, do we have another group, or just whatever question? If you weren't familiar with what group you were in, I'll go ahead and put that out. Other items that we did not cover from this discussion that came up as a question.
I think something that we were also, I just remembered something that, so I was part of Silas's group. But another thing that we didn't discuss was that what we had a question about was, we had the rational actor sort of theory that we were discussing. We had a bunch of other ones, like decision-making models. We were wondering, there's also, like, for rational actor, it's kind of talking about how, we presume that everyone's acting in their own, like, self-interest and logically. We also were kind of discussing, there are other, theories in which, for example, mothers may act in not their best interest when it comes to their child or something. Are there any other, like, unifying theories around that sort of psychology that might be pertinent to our class?
Okay, let me throw it to the group first before I mention anything. Thoughts from you guys about that? inferences on the way people can have a concept about a question or information that might be preconceived or you assume that they might be there. What did you guys discuss in the room? Nobody knew?
I thought a bit about like groupthink or like kind of hive mind, where I don't know, you see this like with the tulip crisis from the 1600s, where if it's like, oh, everyone's buying tulips, that must mean tulips are important and good, and I will also go buy tulips. So that's one, but I don't really have a name for it.
You could probably replace Bitcoin with tulips and be today's answer too, but yeah. Yeah, what is groupthink? I've heard that before. Let's just make sure we all kind of understand. What is a groupthink?
I was just going to mention that Bitcoin for this particular date doesn't actually kind of qualify. Now that it's so cheap.
Are you an investor?
No. But I know people who are rabid about this sort of thing. So, like it's occasionally conversation fodder, just because, they talk about it a lot and I have to listen to it. I was going to mention that if we're talking about alternatives to a rational actor model, so behavioral economics, we have some really good Nobel Prize winning economists here at Berkeley that actually worked on a variety of alternatives there, and they tend to be either, they do propose models sometimes, but they, for the most part, just look at what's happening empirically. People in this situation tend to do this. They tend to not act in their self-interest, but they sort of do. So behavioral economics basically is kind of the field that describes a lot of this. And it's well known that, Homo economicus, somewhat pejoratively called that way, does not really exist in reality. It only exists sort of in economics textbooks and articles. So it's not like it's a bias that we don't know about. People still tend to study this idealized thing, sort of, cows in vacuum type of stuff. But hopefully at this point, very few people actually base, their I don't know, real world predictions on purely theoretical understandings of economics, because we know that it doesn't work.
Right.
It's a bunch of money.
That's the big piece with inflation right now. Is inflation going to happen because we're talking about it so much, or is it going to be diminished because the Fed's kind of push it down? Is that a whole nationwide group think about, inflation? The thing as a data a data scientist, you got to think through these things of the data says something, but also there's data about the imperfect world of humans and how they might make irrational decisions. That should also factor in your response of the question, of the presentation of the information you're presenting as a solution to whatever is being requested. Inflation is a good thing. The Fed is so worried right now about perception, and they do so many studies within, groups to say, what is your feeling about, inflation? Is it going to continue? Is it going to be worse? Because a lot of it is like a group think feel of an entire country saying, yeah, inflation is going to get worse. I better go buy now, or better save my cash, or whatever it might be, or spend my cash. And that the perception sometimes can become the reality. And that is a data set. That is an understanding of how it works. So the best data scientists can pull together very logical, rational information, but also pull in this unique thing of these, humans that, don't always act in such a rational way, but yet we can go back through data sets and see how they acted irrationally so many other times. So maybe we do have an understanding of how that is going to react. Now, can I pull that together? And usually you're giving it as some type of probability. If you invade this country, Mr. and Ms. President, there is this probability that the local population will welcome you. There's this probability that the local population will fight you. There's this probability that you will get shunned by the global community. Who knows? But I can go back through history and say, here are 5 other countries that you've invaded, and here are the results of what happened from those based on, historical information. And then they might say, well, what's your prediction? and you've got to pull your best assessment of these data sets and say, well, for this particular population that you're thinking about invading, they've never liked you. So there's probably a high likelihood they're going to fight you the whole way, and this could be a failure. But you're giving guidance to senior leaders that are saying, I'm thinking about this. What does the data show? And what they're asking is, will we be successful? And you can't answer that, wholeheartedly, but you can give good probability. This happens all the time, especially in military discussions on, if we do this, here are the 20 things that could happen. We think this one will happen, but we should be prepared for any of those. And a good example might be what's happening in Ukraine right now, because of the country that did the invasion was saying, this will be no problem. The data was not giving to that person the way they should have been. And bad data can make bad decisions. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Any other questions that might have come up? It's good discussion, so I want to keep it going if it makes sense. Okay. So what I'm going to do, go ahead. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I was actually curious about that last point you brought up. Like, how
Sure.
does Putin go about making? Does he take a Silicon Valley data-driven approach to planning a war? Do you have? It sounds like you have insight on.
Well, he's
that
following the
particular
same,
case.
just following the exact same pattern in Chechnya. He did the exact same thing. Go in, put a prop leader, a puppet leader. They did the military test, the military operations. We're just testing things. It just happens to be right on your border. It's actually following the exact same. We could use Chechnya. There was another one too, maybe it was Kazakhstan. One of them he did another one, but this is the third time he's had the same playbook. So yes, you can use that data. You can understand what happens. And also you think about with Ukraine, there was, before the 2014 revolution, there was a very pro-Kremlin government in place. There are a lot of Russian speakers. I mean, Ukrainians, it'd be like Californians and New Yorkers, we're all Americans. They're very connected, so he thought it would be much easier. Now, the data should have shown him better. That things have changed since 2014. And I think the Crimea piece was, it's simple Crimea, it's easy. Crimea was given to Ukraine in the beginning. I don't know if you guys knew that. So it was originally theirs anyway. Besides, there's a military port that is critical to their defense. So there's no way they're going to let that go. But then to take something that wasn't more, I'm sorry, you've gone too far. And you basically have backed someone into a corner. So the same thing when you present data to an executive, especially if they don't want to hear it, this is the hardest thing. You've got to give information that shows, based on what I'm seeing and based on historical records and based on what could happen by all these probabilities that I've shown you, this is what you got to deal with. Now, you can make the decision still. I'm not here to make the decision for you, but I am here to guide you. And this is what was the whole situation was with the Cuban Missile Crisis. And we'll talk about this after you get back with, and this happens all the time in secretive White House briefings in the United States, where they'll say, what are all the things that could happen? And as you remember, I think there were 5 options that Kennedy had in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Which one makes the best sense? And if you have information on each one of them, you can make a more rational decision. Now, history goes back and shows, wow, that was a pretty good decision. But at the time, you can't see that. So as a data scientist, it is your job to infer these insights as best you can from all the data sources that you have and allow that leader to make the very best decision. And a lot of times you're going to be making that decision yourself, depending on what role you're in. But this class is about laying out a design for the research to be able to gather enough, to have enough credibility in the backing of the data to be able to make something that a leader can say, yes. Now, if you do a really good job of it, and let's say the leader wanted to do that, your data shows they should not do that. If you do a really good job of presenting it, explaining why, they will change their decision. I know I wanted to do this, but it's not going to work. Let me go ahead and jump because I have this question earlier. What did you guys think of the McKinsey presentation to the CEO of Pepsi? Remember, he's heard that in the video? Someone recap what that was about for the whole class, just in case someone missed it. I know all of you guys saw it and read it and watched the video. What was that situation about? You did watch the video, yes?
I can go.
Okay, good. Excellent. Thank you, man.
What I recall, it was an interview. I forget his name. I think it was something Dolby, but an ex-management consultant that had gone in and been hired by Pepsi, I guess it was, to go evaluate a new product launch that Pepsi wanted to go into Japan and launch their cola, I guess it is.
Yep.
And really that they were hoping that it was going to be their kind of the mass of their kind of overall brand power that they already had that would help them penetrate into the market. And they were there for months on end and really done extensive market research, getting to know the lay of the land. And it ultimately come to their own decision that this isn't going to work. Pepsi isn't going to be a success in Japan. And now they just have to fly home and kind of present their findings to the Pepsi executives. But they knew that they were set in their ways, that they were sitting in their boardroom in New York, and that they thought that Pepsi could do everything. You know, that the power of Pepsi was probably going to win them the market just by being Pepsi. So what they did was they brought in something like 100 different bottles or whatever it was, and just put them on the table before anyone from Pepsi had gone in. So they had the normal can that we're all used to on the one hand, and on the other side, it was all these kind of weirdly shaped bottles that you could buy out of like vending machines that also had whiskey in them. Like they were called like something Sweat, and just really to highlight how different the landscape is over in Japan. And he said that the executive walked in, took one look, and his decision was already made.
Easy. What a, I mean, they did months worth of work, but that simple little trick, I don't know, I don't want to call it a trick, that simple little exercise they did, it got the point across. That's insightful. That is brilliant. That's like a way to help someone understand, especially someone that's really set in their ways. And the information, months worth of work that they had done shows this is not going to work. So somehow you need to convince this person of what you already know from the data. The data shows this isn't going to work. And they could have done charts. They could have done, PowerPoints for days. And the person's like, no, you don't understand. We're Pepsi. We are going in this giant the third largest, now the fourth largest market on the planet. We are going in. We're Pepsi. We don't fail. That was a brilliant way for them to do it. What did you guys think of that little way that they did that? Anybody? Stupid idea, good idea, bad idea, smart, silly?
I think it took a really simple answer. It made it really simplified. It didn't have to be like this very large scale, like very intense or very like, it showed the problem right in front of you. Like, this is literally what you're looking at, and you can make the assumption yourself instead of trying to tell someone what to think.
Yeah, if you can convince someone of information, don't tell them what to think. I mean, you probably had boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses that you're like, oh, this is the way. Like, they don't take that. They have to buy in their own mind. And that's where a great data scientist can use information and data and visuals. We'll talk about data visualization further in the term, about how to convince people of a concept that you know because you have the information. So it absolutely is a good way to do it for that. So thank you for sharing that. I do appreciate it. So what we're going to do is we're going to break you out into the breakout room. Of course, this is where you're going to discuss the weekly assignments. A little bit of an extension of what we may have already done here, but we're not coming back with a question. I want you guys to talk about this. I'd really like to hear some insight on the Cuban Missile Crisis when you guys come back, but we'll break you into groups again. This is, again, the discussion on the assignment. If you, for whatever reason, did not do this week's assignments, be honest about it. Rely on your classmates to help cover you on this one. And then next week, pick up a much heavier load. So I want to see everybody engaged on these, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to break you out. Again, it's going to be random. So we will set this up. So let me go here. Let me do the breakout rooms. All right.
Before we go to the breakout
Sure.
rooms, I've got a question. Is this about like the one big discussion that we're actually graded for, or is it like the other smaller ones as well?
Any of them. So each module, and I can't say it's a week because we have some skip weeks in the middle of the term, but each module, usually a week, it goes through class concepts. And you can see this one's about the organization, how data meets the organization. you'll want to discuss anything within there, and they should be tied together. And that's what notice there's a little piece on the ethics piece that came in this time. We'll get deeper into that more in the term. These concepts are modularized in that way, and I want you to go into your breakout rooms. And I'll jump in every now and then, but I don't want to on these first ones because I want you guys to have a free space to speak with one another. And some of these concepts may be new to some of you. And so, this week we talked about the inability to make clear decisions when you don't have all the data, the knowns and the unknown unknowns and all that. By the way, if you don't understand that, we'll talk about it when you get back. So this is your chance to come together as fellow students and discuss this week's assignments. And I'm going to specifically key on ethics because I want to hear what you're thinking, how to use data in the most ethical and correct way. But go off, see what you think, and then bring some thoughts back to me. We'll have a discussion when we come back, okay? Does that help? Okay, I'll break you out into the groups. So what were some of the items you guys discussed? And by the way, I grabbed everybody's name in each room and I kept the window on my screen so I have it. So room 2, why don't we start with you? Jocelyn, Sly, Spencer, Anton.
Unfortunately, I was kind of like, I told my story, but it kind of took the entire time. So I'm sorry to all my group mates. They didn't really have a chance to tell their stories. But I guess I can take the liberty of going ahead and telling everyone what I told them. So basically, I thought the last mile problem was really interesting. In particular, the statistician's curse, because I think that I, to some extent, experienced a glimpse of that.
Have you heard of it before, or you just experienced it?
No, just experience. So once I read the article, I was like, okay, maybe this is something that's, I mean, to some extent, like sometimes when I, read about like diseases online, like I'm like, oh, that's me. But in this case, yeah, like, I don't know, maybe there's some psychological effect. But in any case, basically, I do research for this group. And we were writing this paper, and we were submitting to Nature Reviews Bioengineering, and they asked me to do the data science, the data cleaning, and then like the exploratory data analysis, and then ultimately like to make the visualizations for the paper. And the deal was that I would like get a co-authorship on the paper, which was great for me. I was like, absolutely, I would love to do this. So we had this like visualization. I don't know how in detail I should go into this, but I guess I'll explain since we're all in data science here. And so basically we had this novel metric measuring like equivalent system mass for like Martian, like exploring Mars, like with bioengineering. And so my job was to like plot like different mission scenarios against each other. So I presented to them, I assume most of you guys have used like ggplot or seaborn before. So I presented them like, it was like categorical data, and the Y scale had to be logarithmic based on like the values that I was given. And so I decided to use like a strip plot and that's what I sent to them. But then my superiors were not happy with it because they specifically asked for a stacked bar graph, which wouldn't work in this particular scenario, at least in my opinion. But they kind of insulted, they were like, you idiot, like I asked for a stacked bar graph and you give me this, like what is this? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, well, something logarithmic axes, and they're like, well, just change it, like make sure it's a stacked bar, and like I can't do that. So they had this brilliant idea, which was to make like a stacked bar plot where the top of each bar in the stack represented the absolute value of each value. But that required me to write like novel plotting code, and I was like, I think there's a reason why this doesn't exist in the standard plotting libraries, but I did it anyways. And so then they were happy with it. They were like, great job. I thought we were done with it. I was like, okay, great. I'll get a paper in
But the
Nature.
data was still accurate when you presented it in the stack bar, right?
Precisely, yes. So we had to I had to put they were right. Like it was a valid visualization. If you read the caption to that figure, you would be able to interpret it. But when I showed it to my friends, that's not the natural way to because it's the problem with a stack bar graph with a logarithmic plot is that each section, since it's a logarithmic y-axis, each section of the y-axis is weighted different. And so we couldn't do it the standard way. And so since we had to do it this way, but that's not the intuitive way to interpret a bar plot. So when I showed it to all of my friends, I was hoping that they would be able to understand it, they would read the caption, but no, they interpreted it naturally, which makes sense. But I was like, okay, well, hopefully the reviewers will, they'll read the caption and they'll know how to interpret this graph. But we ended up getting our paper rejected. And one of the reasons for that rejection was that the plot was off. And then I felt really bad about it because I was like, there was something I still don't know what I should have done in that situation. In the end, I ended up amending the plot. I made something in between what they originally asked for. I made a secondary plot my own way, but yeah, I really still don't know what I should have done. But things are okay now. It's in review by a different Nature paper, so hopefully things will be okay.
It's good learning from us. And one of the things you told to your friends, your data science friends, and they were looking at the data and said, yeah, it didn't make sense, right? Is that what you were talking about when you say you talked to your friends about it?
All, friends in not just in data science, but in any field, even those with domain knowledge that was relevant to the paper.
Yeah, and this is why we want to have you guys engage. You'll help one another throughout your entire careers. If you're not feeling comfortable about something like that, pass it over to another. Another little trick that I do on these chart graph things, I put stuff right on top of it. People that, oh, you're ruining the chart. No, I'm not. So if those charts for each bar chart was different on a logarithmic scale for y, I would put it right on there in big red, maybe slanted. This is on this stack, this is on this one. Just so you're assuming that they're going to read that little item at the bottom that explains the component of how you interpret the results of this visualization. That's a big assumption. Even if you highlight it, sometimes I've highlighted it too. It's a big assumption. Remember your goal. I mean, you want to meet their request, which was, stacked bar chart, but you also want to make sure your end goal is correct interpretation of the data and the insight that it results in. And sometimes you got to do things that may be unusual, but funny, as I put stuff on top of charts, I'll literally put writings or I'll point arrows to things I want them to see. Now it seems natural to me. And usually it's an executive flipping through, you got a big red arrow pointing to something, their eyes will immediately go to that. So you are pointing things out, you're directing the way they're interpreting the data.
I see. So adding text on the plot itself. Remember,
I came from the management consulting world, so we live in PowerPoint. We can't give you the directions to the bathroom down the hallway without pulling out a PowerPoint. We would take large data sets and put them in a visualization that executive is used to seeing in a PowerPoint, and we present it. We would put stuff right on top of the image or the graphic or whatever we've got in the PowerPoint that very clearly, so I use big red arrows, but it points to something on the chart with a little here's what you need to know, or this is the point, or this is why we don't do this. You can actually give the answer and then say, that's why. And then it opens a whole discussion of what this point in the graph means. And then you can have a conversation about it. But yeah, charts don't have to be perfect. If your goal is to get interpretation of the information, and that's assuming your audience can interpret the chart you've created. That's not always a good assumption, in my experience. Anybody else had that? Have you presented something it's really clear to you and they still don't get it? Anybody had that? Alan has for sure.
Yeah, because I was sort of in a similar situation where, I mean, it wasn't really a data visualization. I put together an entire presentation because we had ended up publishing a conference, a short conference paper on what we were working on. and there was like a rehearsal where like everyone in the lab group, right, like was presenting the papers that they had published, right? And it got to my turn and I finished presenting it and no one understood a damn thing. It was really bad. Even, and it was just like, yeah, it's one of those situations where like, you know, like it's great to have feedback from other people in that situation. And I think just going to that like, even though it was so embarrassing because like literally all of the professors who had written all of the papers were like sitting there like across the world, and they all just watched me like flounder for like a good like 15 minutes there. But like they made my presentation a lot better. So yeah.
Oh, when you get to that, think back to that McKinsey situation with the Pepsi CEO. Months of work down to a conference room full of a bunch of soda pop bottles on one side and theirs on the other, under two different tables. Your goal is to get interpretation, and whatever smart way you can figure out to do that, get it done. So yeah, this, especially on conference papers, and I've seen those, you know, they're very technical, they're very deep. To me, that's what you read after the conference. Like, oh, I saw that presentation, I get it, I want to know more. Then you go read the paper. Papers are hard to get points across, especially if it's like a 20-minute presentation, a 1 hour. By the way, you guys will be doing a presentation before the end of this class. How you can get data across, I think you guys have 15 minutes each, isn't that right? 15 minutes. So I'm going to want to see how you get us, the rest of this class, to understand what your point is in 15 minutes, eloquently, efficiently, effectively. It could be an image. It could be a deep graphic chart. It might be the two of them coming together that shows a point. And remember, you want your audience to have interpretation of what this data is, because you're going to know all the deep and how the logarithmic chart works. I still know people that don't understand logarithmic charts. They don't get it. It's difficult sometimes for people that just aren't in that area. And so understand that and make it easy for them. Thank you, though. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. All right. Room 1, Alan, Allegra, Arsh, Priya, Agikar. What'd you guys discuss? Don't jump in.
Honest, I don't remember anymore. I'll be completely honest.
I appreciate honesty.
I partially also like in this conversation, it kind of like sidelined us as well. I think one thing that we all were kind of joined together on is like at least in our review of the video, we didn't really understand what a standard operating system is or something like that. And we all kind of leaped to kind of thinking that that's just kind of the way that things are done, or there's like some methodology that people follow that's standardized. And we weren't sure whether that was like, I don't know, but like, we just kind of wanted to ask folks what their interpretation was of that and where they've kind of seen that take form before.
Okay, more questions. I'll leave that to the group. I'd have to go back and look specifically. Maybe I glossed over because I didn't see that. Anybody else catch that or see something there that didn't make sense of standard ways of doing it?
That was kind of my interpretation too. Just what is the typical procedure? What is everyone used to?
Okay, I'm going to boil this back down to it's the interpretation of the insight you're trying to bring forward. Period. There are multiple standard ways, and if I remember correctly, he had mentioned Oracle as one of the databases that was in the original old days, and we used to do business. They talked a lot about business intelligence in this module. Remember, BI used to be the buzzword in the 90s, and you would do a data cube, and you would slice and dice a data cube, and you would give it to an executive, and it'd be so easy to do. That was kind of a standard model within all across Silicon Valley and any of the tech firms that we did. We did these multi-dimensional data cubes that would feed back into a data warehouse. And Oracle was the standard at the time. So those are very distinct set standards, but of course our tools have gotten much better these days. So maybe I that didn't ring in my ear like it did yours. So this is good insight for me to understand. Maybe I'll go back and see if we can help improve that video. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. I'm
No,
sorry.
the conversation is what it's about. That's what it's about. Yeah, and what I say, when you're in the break, just jot down some notes, because I'm asking you to bring stuff back to the class for me. Room 3, Emily, Kelly, Matthew, Aretha. Any item? What'd you guys discuss?
We kind of all just discussed what we wrote down for the last mile problem. And we all had a variety of responses. I don't know if anyone wants to volunteer their experience. But yeah.
Was it a duke it out thing, or you guys just that didn't?
I could go. So I talked about how I think I've experienced something similar to the convenient truth, where I was working in a group project and we had to deliver a final capstone project that was based on like all the research that we've done that semester. And the final deliverables were an ArcGIS story map, which is basically a really nice way to present slides. They're not slides, but it's just a very aesthetically pleasing platform. And then also just like a regular slide deck that we would use in a presentation. So we were all assigned different slides based on the work that we had done. But when we got together to discuss our slides, I noticed that some members kind of like omitted important information because they thought it might be too technical to explain to the audience. And then they also included like nice pictures, but they weren't necessarily relevant to the like data and the research we had done. So there was just mostly like aesthetically pleasing slides. And I didn't really say anything because I was like, yeah, it'll be fine. And then when it came down to the final presentation, we did get a lot of like audience members who felt like they had unanswered questions, and especially because like our audience members were all technical, like they all had engineering backgrounds as well. So we would have benefited from keeping that information in and not removing it. So I guess like my suggestions, because it says like, what would you recommend in the discussion prompt? I would recommend to like as a team discuss what the important information is in terms of like your research, your data, what are the key facts that need to be included and cannot be omitted. And then afterwards going in and including visuals that are relevant and making it more aesthetically pleasing, but like still making sure that that information is kept there. And then also like making sure to like, if you're in a team, to speak up and make sure your thoughts are heard, because like I should have said something at the moment when I noticed that the slides weren't going that well, but I kind of just let it slide. So that was like my experience.
Good insight. Good insight. Yeah, it's sometimes when you leave data, that's just part of data set presentation maturity. You'll know how to boil it down. A good example, we'll use the same McKinsey Pepsi example. Months and months of work boiled down to a bunch of cans on a table. You know, sometimes you'll learn how to boil things because you'll have so many data sets and so many things you want to point out. Just as you spend more time with this, you'll understand how to get the end result across in a more streamlined manner. I'm not a big fan of leaving out data, but you selectively pick what makes what you need to be presented to get the point across. So sometimes that's the case. Okay, we've been going for a while. Why don't we take a break, about a 10-minute break? Let's stretch our legs. So come back in 10 minutes and I'll go ahead and start the timer and you should be able to see it on your screen once we get it going. But come back in 10 minutes and I'll see you soon, okay? And you guys can see that clock flipping on your screen like I can in my monitor, correct? It's counting down from 10, yes? Is that right, Anton?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
That's
perfect. Right. I will see you guys in 9:52. All right, so what I want to do is I want to spend a little bit of time, especially while we're together, because we've always got more content than we can cover, but I want to make sure, because this is one that I want a lot of discussion from you guys on. So Spencer, are you back with us? Anton, are you back with us? I just want to make sure. And it's regarding the ethical use of data. And one of the things that you're going to have to very much be a part of, and we touch on it on this module, we're going to touch it on a few others, is how you use data in an appropriate way. And we can guide you, we can give you the best information we have, we can help let you understand legally and ramifications and what an appropriate move would be. But it's going to come down to you when you're using this data set. So I wanted to bring up one that I think is very interesting to me. And that is the unlocking of the Apple iPhone for the FBI. Do you guys remember a few years ago when we had the San Bernardino shooting? There was a gentleman and his wife. They were terrorists. They went into a government center in San Bernardino, California, and he had an iPhone. And the FBI asked Apple to unlock that iPhone in this criminal investigation of this terrorist. Do you guys remember that? No? Okay, you do remember it. It's like 5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, 5 years ago. It was relatively recent. And Tim Cook was very adamant about not unlocking that phone. Do you guys remember that? And this was like big headline news, and the FBI got mad at him and says, wait a minute, you're un-American here. We're trying to protect the country. These are terrorists. These are criminals. And he refused to unlock that phone. Do you think, well, let me ask you this before we start that discussion. Raise your hand. How many of you are iPhone users? Okay, Spencer, I can't see you. So Spencer, Matthew, are you the only two? You are, okay. Everyone has an iPhone here, every one of us. Oh, wow, this would be a good conversation. Okay. Was that the right decision for Tim Cook to do? I want to hear from you guys. Should he have unlocked that phone, or did he make the right decision and not unlock the phone?
I can go for it. I personally think it was the right decision. I think well, it's very difficult to kind of say right decision because it definitely depends on whose perspective you're looking at it from. Obviously, from Apple's standpoint, Apple likes to consider themselves like a company that's very secure and like very private and everything like that. So as I guess someone who works at Apple, they would probably, obviously I can't speak for the employees, but the mission statement would probably agree that defending people's privacy no matter what is, their topmost priority. But
Right.
Otherwise, also, I think that it can lead to a slippery slope where the government or really any entity can kind of use this is such a serious circumstance. You did it once before, do it again. Or even proving that it can be done is in a way kind of ceding that it can be done, and it opens the door to hacking or whatever, I guess. And so personally, I choose to believe that it was the right decision, but yeah.
So you think he made the right decision? All right. Anyone think he didn't make the right decision? He should have unlocked the phone?
I think one thing that it would have done, so I actually agree with pretty much everything that Angi said. I pretty much want to say everything that he did. One thing that I was kind of thinking as we were talking, as he was talking, was that, well, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what ended up happening was the U.S. government tried to contract the work out to some type of entity, and they tried to hack into the iPhone. I don't remember if it worked or it didn't, but if I remember correctly, I think it actually might have.
Yeah, they got in. They gave it to the
They got
Israelis.
in, right?
The Israelis can get into anything, but yeah,
Right.
They got in.
Exactly. And so that actually goes to my next point, which is that since Apple didn't choose to do that, the government said, well, we're going to do it anyway, and hired a different entity to do it. So, now they just kind of proved that Apple can be hacked into without, their permission, basically. So if Tim Cook had actually allowed them to do it, they might have done, it a little more secretively, or, provide them a lot more limited access. In this case, it's just the government said, okay, cool, we're just going to brute force it, inside.
So he should give
to
them
the
a
iPhone.
little
So-
bit of access?
Yeah. So what I mean by that is if it's at that point, it's up to Apple to discern how much they would be able to let the government in. If the government just kind of goes about
How
it
much
their own
should they
way.
let them in? A little?
That's
a lot?
that's kind of the question. That's kind of the question. So I think.
Heather, congratulations. You're a new employee at Apple. You are Tim Cook's right-hand man. You are the data scientist that he comes to for everything. He's coming to you with this subpoena from the FBI. What do you guide him to do?
I would kind of tell, if Apple actually does it, they're in control of the situation rather than the government making the decision in this case. And I think that's
Are
kind
they?
of
It's a federal summon. They had to do it. It was illegal for him not to respond to that.
yeah. So I guess in that case, it's well, I mean, it's in their benefit to to go with the government order. But what I mean
So
by
he
that
should have
is,
unlocked it.
yeah. And the reason for that is because, as I said, what ended up happening was the government just chose to do it anyway without their permission. And I think that kind of shows that, Apple one can be hacked. And if it was to be done the other way, it's more that Apple's giving them access rather than the government taking access to that phone.
Well, at the
and
time,
hacking
the
it.
government did not know they could get in at the time.
Right,
So
right.
they
Sure,
said, "Hey,
sure.
Tim Cook, would you please open this for us?" No. Great. Here's a summon from a judge telling you to do it. He still said no.
Yeah.
But you think he should let them in because it can be hacked anyway?
Yeah. Well, that was my instead of the government taking it kind of almost, well, I guess they didn't know whether they're going to hack in, but what I was going to say was that at that point it's just the government trying to just be like, okay, well, cool, we're going to try every possible way to hack in, which
Well, they were going to do that anyway. They were going to do that anyway, but it sure would be easier if Tim would just give them the key and they can get right in, which is what they asked nicely, and he said no.
Yeah. I guess it's just more of who, I don't know, it's whether like Apple wanted to kind of take that power of, okay, like, sure, we're either complying with this order. And
okay, you work at Apple. Congratulations. What do you think they should do?
I think in that case, it's basically like they are allowing the government to access it in this particular scenario. Like they would be able to frame that access in a particular way rather than the government having the ability to just like, okay,
so
cool,
give them some access is what you're
Exactly.
saying. All right, so everybody understand what the concept of a backdoor is, right?
Yeah.
Should Apple and Google with Android or anybody else, should they have a backdoor for governments? Anybody? Alan?
Sorry, I don't quite remember like the specifics of the situation, but I thought that Tim Cook's argument at the time was that there existed no backdoor.
There
to the
still is
phone.
this no backdoor. They
Right.
didn't put
So,
one
like,
in. Should they?
I don't really see how you could put in a backdoor like retroactively. That
Okay, next
sort of
operating
confused
system
me.
comes out in a few weeks. Should Apple or Google with Android or any of the big companies, Tencent in China, anybody, should they put a backdoor in for the government? I mean, the government's trying to solve crimes.
I think that would be a no for me. Mostly
Why?
because
Why is it a no?
I think other people can use the backdoor or find the backdoor, right? If they know of its existence. Yeah, I think that would be the main reason why. Because
Matthew?
if there's an official backdoor, it basically is like an open invitation for any third party to try and go and do this thing because they know it exists.
But it's a secure backdoor. It's just for the government, just to stop criminals.
Even in that situation, I
all right, let's get some more voices. Matthew, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I want to iterate Alan's point that I'm also on the team of no backdoor. That Apple's the big kind of pillar of Apple's brand, so to speak, has been security. That they've almost seemed to be infallible in that regard when a lot of tech companies haven't. And given the fact that even just from the poll of this classroom, that every single person has an iPhone, that no company can guarantee that it is a secure backdoor just for the government. That you just can't say that no one else will be able to get access to it. And if it's just in the specific case, if you're just considering the context of the case with San Bernardino, then yeah, I'll open it up. But that's not the context we're working in. We're working in kind of a wider world where there's 100 million iPhones out in the world that could potentially be hacked into.
All right, Priya, you had your hand up. Let's go to you.
I agreed with everything that was said, but also when we were talking a little earlier about like what I think like would be advised within the company, I think there's also a case to be made for like for the sake of the company's bottom line, it doesn't make sense to put in a backdoor because that would possibly result in like consumer loss of trust and like a decline in people choosing to buy their products. Because even if I know like all of my messages are not private, like the government could access them anytime, I still expect that it's not being handed over by the companies that I'm choosing to buy from.
Is that why you have an Apple?
That's not why, but I feel like I have or consumers have an implicit understanding that nothing that we have is super private. Like everything could be accessed, but not through an official channel of like Apple handing over your installing a backdoor and handing over access.
Okay, and Gunther, I see your hand up, but I'm gonna come back to you. Anton, let's go to you. You had your hand up.
Well, I kind of want to just to balance out the conversation again. I'll try to add some points to the side that's been getting piled on. Just because I wanted to keep the conversation going because I feel like it's a fun conversation to have. I, as a consumer, do not care about Apple's interests in general. I want them to exist because I like their products, but I don't necessarily care what the impact is going to be on them.
Yeah, but Priya says if they put in a backdoor, it's going to hurt them financially. They care about their financial bottom line. You don't care though as a consumer.
I don't care. Why would I care about their financial bottom line?
What if you work for Apple?
Well, if I work for Apple, that's a different conversation. You'd want to necessarily care about subpoenas. We do have a legal process for how these kinds of things are obtained. They are necessary for our system of government. If someone has something that they're supposed to turn on, then the government has a right.
He refused the subpoena. He did not honor it.
For sure. In this case, the way that they didn't honor it was essentially by not building a backdoor that the government ordered them to do. Essentially build some, it was work basically that they had to do to break their own system because it would be invalid for them to build it into the next operating system, which they also refused to do, but that's I think is a kind of a different conversation. Basically, they wanted Apple to break their own system so that the government can then use it for this case and for other cases. I feel like you either ahead of time declare that this stuff is on your iCloud account. This stuff can be accessed by the government. This is not stuff that is private. So if you want stuff that is not private, just like you don't put that in writing and leave it somewhere within your papers, lest the FBI knocks in and finds it in your papers. In a similar way, you wouldn't put stuff on your iCloud that you do not want ever to be found. Essentially, you have a contract ahead of time.
It's not secure.
You should not be able to, but if Apple has already said that we are not going to be able to access this, we're deliberately building a system that the consumer can only access, then it's fair game for them not to abide by a government order to build a backdoor after the fact. So basically, we are pretending that these virtual things have sort of tangible value and that they work in a certain way, although we can decide how they are built. If you have a contract with the consumer, if you said that this is how this works, and we're going to do our best to maintain it the way it works, then they should continue to maintain iCloud to be secure. If they never mentioned a thing like that, if they never said that's hey, we're not going to honor subpoenas to, we have access to your data, but we're going to protect your data against the government. If they did not
in
tell
2
you
or
that
3
ahead of
weeks, when Tim Cook gets up on stage, I think he does it the last week of September, he should say, here's our new product. This part of it's secure, but this part we can't guarantee. He should say that.
That can be a conceivable thing. So for example, the stuff that's on your iCloud, maybe that's public, but the stuff that's in your phone that you deliberately not put on your iCloud, then that maybe, but I mean, you can also make iCloud be encrypted.
Well, this one was the phone. They found the iPhone in the guy's pocket when they killed him. It had information. The government wanted to see it.
For sure. Well, I mean, after the fact, I don't feel like that honors the relationship that Apple has with their consumers. So a lot of more people would be hurt by this if they change it after the fact. And again, in the future, if they decide to make it an open system, they should say so. It's hey, from now on, we're going to be we're going to be treating this as essentially like an open system that other folks can have access to. This relationship between the company and the consumer is kind of what I would argue is more valuable than Apple's stock price. It is a social contract of sorts. That it's a promise that I don't think should be broken. If we're going to sort of live in this digital world, then these things have to have some type of weight for people to be able to use the technology securely. And if we don't, if we kind of after the fact are agreeing that after the fact, all of our data will eventually become not secured and all this stuff will be tracked, then we're enabling potentially a very dangerous future.
And this social contract supersedes government subpoenas because the trust with the consumer is more valuable, correct? That's what you're saying?
Kind of. What I'm saying is that in essence, in this case, because this is a technical system that they're building in a certain way, where they say that they themselves do not have access. Yeah, it's unfair to force them to build sort of the back door in, to force the company to build it in. If they had access to it, if people were entrusting Apple with their files, like you do on Dropbox or on Google Drive, then that would be a different thing. But if Apple deliberately builds something that they say is secure, I don't feel like it's fair to come in and force them to make something that is not secure. I understand that this may be like an intangible difference, but I feel like this should matter to some extent, that you shouldn't be able to be forced to sort of build these things in after the fact. Spend your company time to build them in after the fact. If they want to do it, they can go hire.
Well, the government would argue it's not unsecure. It's just a backdoor with us at the key. And, we're the government. You can trust us. So listen, I want to get some more voice in. Jocelyn, Kelly, Allegra, Arsh, I'd love to. This is a great chance to jump in and be a part of the conversation because there's no wrong answer. It's your opinion. There was one person that was really, really vocal at this time, and that was the CEO of BlackBerry. And he went on a speaking tour even. I can't believe Tim Cook is doing this. He should unlock that phone. This is un-American. He is preventing law enforcement from doing their job. Why was he so adamant about that? CEO of BlackBerry.
I think the CEO of BlackBerry wanted to put pressure on Apple. I think that as businesses, they want to compete, and that would be a very great way to put pressure on Tim Cook to act one way or the other. I think for Tim Cook, or actually for the crime, if someone knows that an iPhone is easy to be accessed by the government, they're just going to use BlackBerry. They're going to use something else. It doesn't necessarily stop the crime. And what it does is make every user of this iPhone vulnerable. So even if the customer doesn't care, they are now vulnerable to the government. And the government's no stranger to over surveillance. And if they have this easy key, that might be what they go to instead. And by not locking the phone, that doesn't necessarily stop them from accessing the information they need. It just makes it harder. So ultimately, it's not up to Apple to solve issues. And if it has such severe consequences and the government can't always be trusted, it doesn't seem like a smart decision either way.
I don't know. Who was BlackBerry's biggest customer at this time and all the time? What little customers they have left? Who's their biggest customer? Who do you guys have BlackBerries? So Berkeley students are not Berkeley's key demographic customer. Who is?
Wait, is the US government still uses BlackBerries most of the time, right? Yeah.
Why does the US government use BlackBerry so much? How's that infrastructure set up security-wise? All right, maybe so in the BlackBerry world, there's a server in the cloud. There's also a server on the customer side on their corporate data center, which they lock down very heavily. So CIA, Secret Service, FBI, they all use BlackBerries. Yeah, here's a CEO of a company whose biggest customer is like, yeah, you go get them. We're supporting you, absolutely. But how does it make consumers feel? Let me show you. Let me bring some more conversation pieces into the conversation. This was there's strong feelings on either way on a lot of sides of this. I kind of trust the Pew Research Center. I don't know if you guys do, but they seem to be pretty middle of the road to me. They did a lot of research to try to understand should you unlock the phone? A lot of people said, yes, absolutely. This is a fight against terrorism. You should absolutely unlock the phone. Some people said, no, you should not, but more said they should. So here is a CEO. And remember, the reason you want to get to this is how are you entrusted with consumers' data inside a corporation? What do you do with it? How do you make these decisions? And then they went a little bit further and they looked at it by demographic, by age. They looked at it by political leanings, as you can see here. They looked at it by educational level. Postgraduate was more yes. Ironically, some college no, but high school was more about 50-50. Look at the Republican side. More Republicans said they should unlock it. Democrats were a little bit less. Independents were even stronger for no, do not unlock it. And then for those independents at the very bottom there that lean Republican, they were very heavy yes. For the independents that lean Democratic, they were very heavy no. And then when they get even further to the iPhone users, now this is you guys, okay? If you own an iPhone, should they unlock it? Because remember, this is, if I'm an Android customer, who cares, right? Look at some of the differences here on should they or should they not with the iPhone users. And they did a difference by own a smartphone. And again, 43% no, 47% yes, as opposed to some other smartphone, 53% said yes. You got to kind of understand, and I love these data sets of how they kind of bring these things forward to understand what's happening within the environment, what Tim Cook is looking for. Now, again, the government did end up getting the phone unlocked. Ironically, they screwed it up themselves. The phone was in their possession. You know how you change the password multiple times, it locks you out? They did that. Apple knew that. They could see that because it was fully backed up to the iCloud. If they just would have, held off, they would have, but it erased everything on the iCloud. So, and so here's the, the police, the government's trying to, do something and end up screwing things up. Again, it was an Israeli firm that ended up getting this done. To do it. Let me see what this is. So, it goes to show you that, yeah, it can be done, but then you got to ask yourself back on the component piece of, what makes sense. You are going to have access to a lot of data. And interestingly, some of the most senior executives I know, they kind of have a right-hand person. It's a data analyst, because they need information to make deep business decisions. And as a data scientist, you are exposed to a lot of corporate information, a lot of government and organizational information, and the consumers, maybe knowingly, but probably unknowingly, Anton, I mean, like to have Tim Cook stand up there and go, okay, this part is illegal, we got to do this, and this is safe, but this part over here, we can't guarantee it. And people are like, why? You can't guarantee myself? Like to confuse a consumer like that? Wow, you're talking a lot. The bottom line is, do companies have a fiduciary responsibility to do the right thing, to protect data, to protect users' privacy? And you as the data scientist, you're going to see all this. You're going to see this data. There have been whistleblower pieces where people are having information to data. It's a difficult situation to answer. The reason Tim Cook was so adamant about not unlocking that phone, where does Apple make most of its sales? In the United States or out of the United States? Anybody?
I think it's in the United States, but I'm not sure.
So they actually make more money overseas than they do in the United States. So this is one market. Do they sell iPhones in Russia, or did they at the time anyway? Heck yeah, they did. They sold them in Turkey too. They sold them in Saudi Arabia too. They sell them everywhere. They're not going to leave markets open. And so what if the Russian government comes to Apple and says, unlock this phone? What if the Turkish government says Gulen, who's living in Pennsylvania under protection from the United States, we think he's a terrorist. In our views, he's a terrorist. I don't know if you guys know Gulen, but we're helping him by keeping him in Pennsylvania as an older cleric. Remember when the 2016 revolution happened in Turkey, the attempted coup? They think he's a terrorist. Unlock the phone. You did it for the United States government. Do you see this slippery slope? Like one person's terrorist could be another person's freedom fighter. It's very difficult. And if Tim did it for the United States government, the UK government would ask for it. The French government would ask for it. They sell phones in China. The Chinese government would ask. Do you understand, see how this just keeps unraveling? He had a room full of lawyers and multiple data scientists working with him on this issue when they called this, because the summons came in and they had to give a pretty quick response. And I think they work all weekend on their response. And they were like, no, we are not doing this. We are going to defy a subpoena from the United States government. I want you to, again, I want to leave this with you on the importance of understanding data privacy, the data assets you're going to have and capabilities you're going to have in C, and to do the right thing. And the right thing is going to be how you interpret these things. We're going to talk much more about ethical use of data as the course goes on, but it got first mentioned in module 2, so I wanted to bring this up. Okay. All right, we are right at time. I'm going to go ahead and close out the class. I'll stay on for any questions that you might have. We'll do official office hours after. Any questions from anyone? Anything? Thank you, Spencer. I appreciate it. Anything that you want to bring up before we close out the class this evening and I turn off the recording?
One quick thing. I was just curious. What kind of happened to Apple once they defied the subpoenas? Did the government kind of follow up on that?
Once the Israeli, it's an Israeli intelligence, and I don't think it's the one that does the new one that we've been hearing about. I can't remember their name. Starts with the P, and if you click on a link, it infects your phone. So it was a different company. And by the way, you got to understand the reason the Israelis do this. They have incredible technologies, and they are living in a very dangerous neighborhood, and they have to do it to protect themselves. So Israelis really understand data privacy, data integrity, and all that good stuff. Once they had the phone unlocked, they dropped the lawsuit. They dropped the subpoena. We don't need you anymore. It went away. It just went away. And a lot of people have a question. Did Tim Cook come out of this looking better? Did he come out looking worse? I think for most consumers of Apple products, they respected that he at least attempted and kind of was successful in protecting their right. I mean, you paid a lot of money for this device. Do you trust him to keep it secure? I sure hope you do. He's trusting that too. And they have gone on a huge marketing binge of, we're Apple, we're secure, you can trust us. Whereas other companies are selling your data and they're going heavily after Google and Facebook, but Google's even switching now. They have to, there's too much pressure. So yeah, it just kind of faded away. Why pursue a very politically tense case with a lot of media coverage when you already have what you want? And they did, thanks to that Israeli company. I can't remember the name of it, but it's not the same one with the one that's infecting global leaders' phones right now. And even on that one, the Israeli company says, we only sell it to friendly governments. And they sold it to Saudi Arabia, and they sold it to a whole bunch of other people. And it's being used for purposes other than crime prevention and things. So any other questions? Okay. No?
Oh.
Go ahead.
I just said one more thing. I just want to say that I think it was all a game of optics. I mean, if the Patriot Act tells us anything, is that the government can get any information they want whenever they want, legally. So
well, if it weren't for Edward Snowden, we wouldn't know that they were even doing it, would we?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I waited until the recording was off. Oh, JK, it's not. I didn't say anything.
I had not turned it on. By the way, it's just us on the call. Everything I want us to get to understand. There's no right or wrong answer. I don't know. We should know this is a safe space. Any opinions are well respected. There's difficult decisions, but as a data scientist, you're going to run in them. I'm telling you, especially if you go through demographic data that might negatively hurt a particular demographic. You've got to really rationalize how the data is brought in, and also where there's holes in the data. There are certain demographics that just don't have the data to justify what you need to justify. You should adequately explain that so people that are making the decisions can truly understand what might be a problem. That is your responsibility to bring that to their attention. That makes sense to you. So, okay, so yeah, I will go ahead and turn the recording off. I can get my mouse down there. All right, thank you very much. I will see you one room tonight. Everybody, please this week respond to all the questions and absolutely do the last discussion question. And I will see you 1 week from tonight on next Tuesday. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Absolutely.